Good evening once again, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here again, and this is actually going to be a little bit of a mixed series of little mini commentaries on a couple things that have come up in both in my personal endeavors here on YouTube and also in national politics, specifically with regards to the election. As all of you know, I have been very intently following the fundraising efforts of Ron Paul along with everything else he's been doing, and I am happy to report that as of this evening he is right on the borderline with hitting $4 million for his fundraising efforts for the first quarter of this year's presidential primary cycle. Naturally, this is just the beginning in what will be a long and hard fought-out campaign, but given that Ron Paul is out raising most of the competition, this is a very positive sign. But what is more telling is the people that are coming up short in the fundraising department. Case in point, so-called Tea Party favorite Herman Cain. I'm going to read a little article here on Newsmax that was put out just yesterday, actually. Herman Cain's New Hampshire staff quits. Sounds familiar to something that I was talking about last week with good old former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and his problems with his staff. And it reads as such. Presidential hopeful Herman Cain has lost his New Hampshire staff amid allegations that the pizza magnate's campaign wasn't taking the Live Free or Die state seriously. Cain's New Hampshire campaign director Matt Murphy and field director Jim Zeiler both stepped down, leaving Cain without full-time help in the run-up to the first-in-the-nation primaries, the Manchester Union Leader reports. Murphy said there was no ill will toward Cain. There was a strategic difference, and I left the campaign because of those differences. The differences involved the New Hampshire strategy and how much investment and the campaign should put into New Hampshire. Murphy, a former National Rifle Association organizer, said he had pushed Cain to spend more time in New Hampshire, where he has been well received despite drawing only 4% in the polls. He also asked for more money to hire extra staff, but had been rebuffed. Ellen Carmichael, spokeswoman for Cain, said Murphy has been replaced but did not say who replaced him. Obviously somebody that's just going to be a space filler, since it's obvious that Cain is not really serious about New Hampshire. The new addition to Cain's team will serve in the capacity of state director and is a candidate that the campaign is very excited about, Carmichael said. Apparently not excited enough to announce who it is. The long and short of this is that Herman Cain doesn't think that he has a shot in hell in New Hampshire, and so he's moving on. And frankly, that will leave a good number of votes that can be transferred over to an actual real Liberty candidate in Ron Paul. And apparently, on top of this, Herman Cain apparently can't seem to raise that much money. If we look specifically at the blog over on USA Today on politics, it reads as such. Businessman Herman Cain is hosting his own money bomb. A short fundraising burst today. ABC News reports that former Godfather Pizza CEO is trying to get 2,500 pledges. His website says he's raised a little over $26,000 as of 12:30 p.m. The total combined revenue that was raked in for this particular money bomb did not clear the $100,000 mark. So evidently, Herman Cain is pretty good at talking up crowds with talking points and impressing fake Frank Luntz focus groups. But when it comes to fundraising, the poor guy just can't even get a nickel for his grandma, let alone get something that will make him viable as a contender in the world of political advertising on television and in grassroots organizing, which I'm very sorry to say does cost a fair bit of money. In short, I think this is the beginning of the end of Herman Cain, and thank goodness for that. One less insignificant fake Tea Party guy crowding the field, one less banking shill that I need to worry about clogging up the works. Now, apparently, there is also some things going on with attempts by both Palente and new arrival Jon Huntsman. The reality of politics is campaigns are expensive. Huntsman finance director Kevin Curran says in an email, "We have a lot of work to do to introduce the governor to more voters, and we cannot do it without your critical support." Now, the former Utah governor, Jon Huntsman, is asking for contributions as small as $10 in his fundraising pitch, with a goal of raising $200,000 by Thursday. And this article was put up, I believe, 2 days ago. So if he can make $200,000, he will be at roughly, I would say, maybe 1/20th of what Ron Paul has raked in already. And, again, Jon Huntsman is just another establishment moderate that leans neocon. Frankly, anybody that says he respects Barack Obama and thinks he's a great leader is not really somebody that's worthy of much attention. And he's not going to get much attention. He's a niche candidate, and his niche is the wrong one. I'll tell you that right now. The only person that has been really noticeable other than Paul in fundraising is the human ATM machine, Mitt Romney, who is basically set to clear the $15 million mark as things are going right now. All of this from big donors, from corporate banks, and other interests that are tied into Washington neo-mercantilism. I'm not really concerned with how much money Mitt Romney raises at this point, because frankly he's going to need every penny of it to buy back whatever support he doesn't have because of all of the things that he did as governor of Massachusetts and all the things that he said publicly, which are going to come back to bite him. Right now, I'm pretty well pleased with the way things are going, at least from a fundraising perspective. I wish the mainstream media could be a little bit more fair in terms of debate coverage, but they are getting a little bit better in some respects, but not nearly enough, obviously. Now, moving on. There is a video that was recently put up by a user who I've had a couple of run-ins with in the past when he used to call himself Mr. Views 90. His current name is Mr. Conservative Talk. You may or may not be familiar with this guy. He is basically somebody who has not seen a whole lot of activity on his channel, but he does regular political commentaries, and his stuff consists primarily of banal internationalist neocon drivel. But he put up a video a little less than a week ago, basically stating that the vote on the Libya war authorization was shameful and that we are in dangerous times because we are not breaking the bank trying to unseat every single dictator that we don't like and replace them with a dictator that we do like. He thinks that's a good investment. I obviously don't. There are some people that are so gloriously deluded that they make my skin crawl. And then there are other people that are so gloriously deluded that I think that they're actually amusing. And Mr. Conservative Talk falls into the latter category. I can't hate the guy because on one hand he's basically harmless. His way of doing things is not something that's going to attract a lot of attention. And to tell you the truth, I feel for the guy on some level. I mean, he is just trying to put up some stuff for other people to watch. It's just, his own little hobby, and I don't think it's really something that he is as involved in as I would like to think he might be, because he'd obviously be a little bit more savvy about these things, even if he was trying to push a neocon viewpoint, which God only knows why anybody would want to do that. So you can feel free to hop on over, watch that video, and laugh at the inherent lack of logic. This is a guy who still thinks that George W. Bush was a great president and was proud of his support for Jon McCain, even though he was a completely terrible candidate for public office and was the only candidate that I think really made it possible for Barry Soetoro to currently hold the office of the presidency. What America needs right now in this rather dire circumstance that it finds itself in is a change in the right direction. And a change in the right direction is something that can be best summed up by someone who was willing to take big steps towards eliminating all of the wasted money and wasted resources that we currently have committed to dead-end programs and dead-end internationalist endeavors. Let's face it, a dollar spent in Libya, in Iraq, or in Afghanistan is ultimately a dollar flushed down the toilet. We're either blowing something up or we're building infrastructure that will most likely be turned to some use other than we want when it finally comes time for us to leave said country. The best thing that we can do is cut our losses, say, hey, you know something? We blew $4 trillion on all of this bullshit, but at the end of the day, you know something? It's a lot better than blowing another $4 trillion over another decade's worth of occupation, let alone the fact the cost would go up since we're finding even more and more countries to occupy or to become involved with in a kinetic fashion. It's really, really telling where on one hand you have idiots like the ones that write for truthout.org, quoting Dick Cheney and George W. Bush in order to justify their idiotic domestic policy ideas. But it's even more humorous to see people like Mr. Conservative Talk go on and on and on about how Ron Paul is the supposed liberal in foreign policy, and yet who is conducting the war in Libya? Barack Obama. Who represents the majority of people supporting him by votes in Congress? The Democratic Party. Give me a break. Anyway, it's tough to get too passionate about a guy like this because, again, he's harmless and in many respects he's not really all that meaningful as a figure. He's just a random dolt that I happen to bump into on here. Now, to close off this particular rant before I go and get myself some much-needed sleep, I'm just going to share some final thoughts with you regarding the little encounter that I had not too long ago that was the subject of my last rant. The individual in question that I had a debate with, who was insistent that the Libyan war was justified on the grounds that we were supposedly protecting the weak against the strong and that we had UN obligations and agreements to meet, and also who later argued, that the world is bigger than just your own little narrow viewpoint, and everybody has their own viewpoints. They all needed to be respected, which, of course, I don't respect all other viewpoints because all other viewpoints are not necessarily worthy of respect, depending on what they are. I got another response from this individual. This will probably be the last one I bring up because I think I'm going to cut the conversation short now. But suffice to say, the fella told me that I was a drab, pontificating jerk who spent way too much time talking about politics and not enough time enjoying life. These weren't his exact words, but this is what he was implying. He said, a lot of the channels featured on my channel, which I commented on as being vapid personalities, are not just about politics. Occasionally we need to take a break and we need to be entertained. This gets into what I think is the core problem with the American political discourse in this particular day and age. Americans, in addition to being fat, piggish, and easily swayed into doing things that are horrible simply to keep their stomachs full, are also in the process of amusing themselves to death. When you look at the average person in this country, what do you see? You see a person that is very savvy when it comes to regurgitating professional sports statistics, somebody who knows who's who whenever there's a red carpet event down in Hollywood or at some film festival. You meet people that have some other hobby relating to mainstream culture that has absolutely no impact on anybody else's life apart from some distraction away from how horrible the world is right now. This is what sums up the American condition. We're a bunch of overly entertained, underinformed idiots. And what I got from this guy that I was talking to with this last post was I got some really poor attempt at a moral justification for why this is okay, why we should not care in a passionate way for what's going on around us, and instead should be content to occasionally amuse ourselves at people who poke fun at the way the world is. I don't really go for people who are all funny all the time. The kind of comedians that I'm into are the ones that are either completely sardonic and iconoclastic and rip down all of the crap that everybody thinks is so important, and the ones who tell the truth and do so in a way that inspires laughter. I'm thinking specifically of people like the dearly departed Sam Kinison and other people of that particular persuasion. You've got a little bit more intellectually oriented people like George Carlin, who is also fairly vulgar at the same time, but he gets the point across. Bill Hicks, people that actually comment on the aspects of the social and moral decline of this country, and do so in a way that's actually relevant to a specific time period. Granted, being somebody who passed away in 1992, Sam Kinison's commentaries on things like world hunger and other things of that persuasion are naturally things that have not as much relevance today, but George Carlin is somebody that I can watch, I can laugh at, and yet be all the better for intellectually, having heard what he has to say on a given subject. Don't agree with these guys on everything, but on a lot of things they are definitely in the right way of viewing things, and they have their priorities in order. But when I look at these other particular channels that do nothing but glorify pop culture and the brainlessness that comes with it, I just can't help but be turned off and not really want to associate myself with these particular channels. And when somebody touts them and then insists that I take them seriously as somebody arguing a political position, can't do it. People that regurgitate various aspects of pop culture and who immerse themselves in it tend to be useless when it comes to politics. Me myself, I barely even watch Hollywood cinema anymore. I have a somewhat moderately decent collection of DVDs, many of which are collecting dust right now, except for a few sci-fi fantasy favorites. I almost never turn on the television anymore, except for network news, and usually then it's so I can have something to be pissed off about. I only deal in things that are actually relevant, and when I want to entertain myself, I find more constructive ways of doing so. Might get on my guitar and work on my chops. Might check out the latest music album with something that is in some way relevant to our current predicament, or has some actual storylines with actual rewarding plot lines rather than just self-indulgent excursions into odd side stream counterculture concepts or mainstream humor. Even, there's a bunch of different things that they get into in cinema. Some of the stuff they don't even bother with plotline. They just load up on the CGI and expect you to be amused. And every once in a while you might have something resembling a plot that was done to death about 10 years ago. Avatar. Anyway, so just to sum this all up, there's always hope. But hope is always contingent on what you do. And what you do is contingent on what you believe. So my advice to anybody out there listening to this who wants to get something from it, keep the faith in the Ron Paul revolution and realize that while we are ultimately powerless to change the world, we can be part of the change by changing ourselves for the better. And with that, I bid you all adieu. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.